I opened my husband's Bible and found a note. If she discovers the truth, kill her. I was trembling, my heart racing as I read those 7 terrifying words. My perfect marriage, my loving husband, everything I believed was a lie. What I did next was shocking. Those words were scrawled in handwriting I didn't recognize, tucked between the pages of Psalms like some twisted bookmark. My hands shook so violently, I nearly dropped the leather-bound Bible that had sat on Terrence's nightstand for 15 years. 7 words that would shatter everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, and the man I trusted with my heart. I want to pause here because I'm so glad you're watching. If my story has reached you, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. I need to know how far this tale of betrayal and revenge has traveled. Drop a comment and tell me what city you're listening from. Your support means everything as I share what happened next. My name is Jacqueline, and in March of 1995, I was living what everyone in our small Louisiana town called the perfect life. Picture this, a beautiful 2-story colonial house on Magnolia Street, where the scent of jasmine drifted through our windows every spring morning. I was 32 years old, the devoted wife of Terrence Williams, a respected bank accountant whose reputation in our community was spotless. Every Sunday, you'd find us in the 3rd pew at Mount Olive Baptist Church, me in my carefully pressed dress and matching hat, our 2 children Michael and Teresa scrubbed and shining beside us. Terrence would have his arm around my shoulders, nodding approvingly as Pastor Johnson delivered his sermon. We looked like we'd stepped out of a magazine about successful Black families in the South. I lived for routine back then. Up at 5:30 every morning to start coffee and lay out Terrence's clothes. Breakfast at 6:15 sharp, grits, eggs, and turkey sausage just how he liked it. I'd pack his lunch in the same brown paper bag, kiss him goodbye at the front door, and wave from our porch as his sedan disappeared down our tree-lined street. My days were filled with what I thought was purpose. Grocery shopping at Peterson's Market, where Mrs. Ruby always asked about the children, volunteer work at Teresa's elementary school, and those long afternoons perfecting my grandmother's cornbread recipe. I believed I was living the dream my mother had painted for me, a woman whose worth was measured by how well she kept her family together. Terrence was everything our community admired in a man. 15 years at First National Bank, handling accounts for half the town's most prominent families. He wore his suits like armor, spoke with quiet authority, and never forgot to open my car door or pull out my chair at Sunday dinner. Other wives at church would whisper about how lucky I was, how Terrence treated me like a queen. But that note, those 7 words hidden in the pages of his Bible, would reveal that everything I thought I knew was built on lies. The man who held my hand during prayer, who kissed our children goodnight, who everyone respected as a pillar of our community, was planning something so sinister it would rock our small town to its core. What I discovered next would change everything, and the woman I became, well, she was someone I never knew existed. But let me take you back to how it all began, because to understand the depth of his betrayal, you need to see the life I thought we were building together. My morning started like clockwork in our house on Magnolia Street. The alarm would chime at 5:30, and I'd slip out of bed while Terrence still slept, padding barefoot across the hardwood floors to start our day. First, the coffee, a rich chicory blend that filled our kitchen with warmth. Then I'd iron his white dress shirts with precision my grandmother had taught me, making sure every crease was sharp enough to cut glass. By 6 o'clock, I had breakfast waiting, cheese grits with just a touch of butter, scrambled eggs fluffy as clouds, and turkey sausage browning in my cast-iron skillet. The same breakfast every weekday for 15 years, because Terrence believed consistency was the foundation of success. I'd set his place at the head of our mahogany dining table, his orange juice in the crystal glass we'd received as a wedding gift, his pills arranged neatly beside his plate. Our children were my greatest pride. Michael, 14 and already showing signs of the brilliant mind that would later earn him an engineering scholarship, would stumble downstairs with his homework clutched in one hand and his trumpet case in the other. He was first chair in the school band, honor roll, every semester, the kind of son who made other mothers ask what my secret was. Teresa, my baby at 11, was pure sunshine wrapped in pigtails and patent leather shoes. She'd bounce into the kitchen humming gospel songs, already dressed in the uniform I'd laid out the night before. That child could sew a straight seam better than some grown women, and her art projects always earned the place of honor on our refrigerator. Every Sunday morning was our grand performance. I'd wake extra early to hot comb my hair into perfect waves, slip into my best dress, usually something I'd sewn myself from patterns I'd collected, and make sure the children looked like they belonged in a church directory. Terrence would emerge from our bedroom looking distinguished in his navy suit, adjusting his tie with the same precision he used for everything else. At Mount Olive Baptist, we were the Williams family everyone admired. Terrence would guide me to our pew with his hand on the small of my back, help me with my coat, and sit close enough that our shoulders touched during prayer. He'd nod along with Pastor Johnson's sermons, his amen ringing out at all the right moments. After service, he'd shake hands with the deacons, discuss business with other men while keeping one protective arm around my waist. But even then, cracks were forming in our perfect facade, though I was too faithful to see them clearly. Those monthly business trips started about 2 years before I found that note. Bank conference in Baton Rouge, he'd explain, packing his leather suitcase with the same methodical care he brought to everything. Federal regulations, new procedures. Nothing you'd find interesting, sweetheart. The way he'd kiss my forehead felt different during those explanations, distant, almost guilty. I'd wave goodbye from our front porch, watching his car disappear down Magnolia Street, and something in my stomach would twist. Not suspicion exactly, but an uneasiness I couldn't name. He'd return 2 days later with expensive gifts, perfume I never wore, jewelry that felt too flashy for our conservative lifestyle. "Thought you'd like this," he'd say, but his eyes never quite met mine. Then there were the phone calls. Late at night, his voice would drop to whispers when he thought I was asleep. Transfer completed, I'd hear through our thin bedroom walls. "Everything's in order." When I'd ask about bank business the next morning, he'd wave away my questions with talk about confidential client information and federal banking laws. My grandmother's voice would echo in my head during those quiet moments when doubt crept in. "Jacqueline, baby," she told me while teaching me to thread her old Singer sewing machine. "A woman needs her own craft, her own way of surviving. Pretty dresses and sweet words won't put food on your table if a man decides to walk away." I dismissed her warnings as old-fashioned thinking, believing love and devotion were enough to hold any marriage together. But those seeds of wisdom had been planted deep. Every evening, after the dishes were washed and the children tucked into bed, I'd sit at my grandmother's sewing machine, working on church dresses for other women in our congregation. $20 here, $30 there. Pocket money, I told myself, though something inside urged me to save every penny in a coffee can hidden behind my winter coats. The fabric would flow through my fingers as I stitched, and I'd find myself wondering why a man who claimed to love his family would be so secretive about his work. Why would someone who preached about honesty and faith keep so many locked doors in his own house? What I didn't know was that those locked doors were hiding secrets dark enough to destroy everything. March 15th, 1995, a date burned into my memory like a brand. It was the anniversary of my grandmother's passing, 5 years to the day since we'd laid her to rest beneath the old oak tree at Restland Cemetery. I always got emotional on that date, but this year felt different. This year, the grief came with a migraine so fierce it felt like lightning splitting my skull in two. I'd been fighting the pain since dawn, pressing cold washcloths against my temples while trying to maintain my morning routine. But by noon, the throbbing had become unbearable. The children were at school, Terrence was at the bank, and our house felt like it was closing in around me. Every sound seemed amplified. The tick of our grandfather clock, the hum of the refrigerator, even my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. "Lord, please," I whispered, stumbling toward our bedroom. "Just give me some relief." I needed my prescription migraine medication, but in my pain-fogged state, I couldn't remember where I'd last seen the bottle. Had I left it in the kitchen? The bathroom? Desperation makes you do things you'd never consider under normal circumstances. That's when I remembered seeing a medicine cabinet in Terrence's home office, the one room in our house that had always been off limits. My private sanctuary, he'd called it, installing a lock on the door our second year of marriage. A man needs space to handle business without interruption. I'd accepted that explanation for 13 years, respecting his need for privacy even when curiosity nagged at me. But that day, with pain shooting through my head like hot needles, respect took a back seat to necessity. I knew he kept a spare key on top of the doorframe. I'd seen him retrieve it once when he thought I wasn't watching. Standing on my tiptoes, my fingers searched along the dusty wood until they found the small brass key. The lock turned with a soft click that sounded like thunder in the quiet house. Stepping into Terrence's office felt like entering a stranger's world. The room was immaculate, everything arranged with military precision. His mahogany desk dominated the space, papers stacked in perfect piles, pens lined up like soldiers. Awards from the bank hung on the walls alongside his business degree, and family photos smiled down from every surface. Our wedding day, the children's school pictures, church picnics where we looked like the perfect family. I found the medicine cabinet behind his desk, but no migraine relief. Just antacids and aspirin that wouldn't touch this kind of pain. Frustrated and still desperate, I turned to leave when something caught my eye, our family Bible sitting on his bookshelf, the same leather-bound King James version his mother had given us as a wedding gift. It struck me as odd. That Bible usually lived on his nightstand, had been there for 15 years like a faithful guardian. What was it doing in his locked office? Maybe it was the migraine. Maybe it was grief for my grandmother, or maybe it was divine intervention, but something compelled me to reach for that Bible. As I lifted it from the shelf, it seemed heavier than I remembered, weighted down with more than just scripture and gold leaf pages. That's when it happened. The Bible slipped from my trembling hands, hitting the hardwood floor with a thud that echoed through the silent house. Pages fluttered open, and something white caught my eye, a piece of paper that had been tucked between the Psalms, hidden where no one would think to look. My heart stopped. Completely stopped. There, in handwriting I didn't recognize, were 7 words that would haunt me forever. If she discovers the truth, kill her. The paper wasn't addressed to anyone, wasn't signed by anyone, but somehow I knew with the certainty that comes from 15 years of marriage, that she meant me. The woman who made his breakfast every morning, who ironed his shirts with love, who sat beside him in church every Sunday. Time seemed to freeze in that moment. The migraine vanished, replaced by a different kind of pain, the kind that comes from your world tilting sideways and nothing looking the same again. I read those words over and over, hoping they'd change, hoping I'd misunderstood. But the message was crystal clear, written in bold black ink that seemed to mock my disbelief. My hands shook so violently I could barely hold the paper. Questions flooded my mind faster than I could process them. What truth? Who had written this? Was Terrence the intended recipient, or had he written it himself? How long had this threat been hiding in our most sacred book? Every instinct screamed at me to confront him immediately, to wave that note in his face and demand answers. But something deeper, some survival instinct I'd inherited from generations of strong women, whispered a different message. Be smart, Jacqueline. Don't let them know you know. I thought of my grandmother's words about women needing their own way of surviving. I thought of those mysterious business trips, those whispered phone calls, those locked doors I'd respected for too long. Most of all, I thought of my children sleeping peacefully in their beds each night, trusting their father to protect them. Kneeling on that office floor with my world crumbling around me, I did what Southern women have done for generations when faced with the impossible. I prayed. Not for understanding, not for forgiveness, but for wisdom. For the strength to do whatever it would take to protect my family. What I discovered next would prove that prayer was answered in ways I never could have imagined. The next morning arrived like any other, but I was no longer the same woman who'd made breakfast in that kitchen for 15 years. As I cracked eggs into the skillet and stirred grits with mechanical precision, that note burned in my memory like a brand. If she discovers the truth, kill her. Every word felt carved into my soul. But I'd made a decision during those sleepless hours, tossing and turning while Terrence snored peacefully beside me. I would not confront him. I would not give away my advantage. Instead, I would become someone I'd never been before, a detective in my own home, investigating the man I'd promised to love until death do us part. "Morning, sweetheart," Terrence said, settling into his usual chair. His kiss on my cheek felt like betrayal now, though I forced myself to smile and pour his coffee just the way he liked it. Every gesture had to remain normal, every routine preserved, while I gathered the evidence that might save my life. "How did you sleep?" I asked, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "Like a baby," he replied, not meeting my eyes as he reached for his orange juice. "Big day at the bank today. Important client meeting." Important client. Those words would haunt me as I went about my morning routine, waving goodbye from our front porch like a devoted wife, while my mind raced with questions. Who was this important client? What kind of business required such secrecy? The moment his car disappeared around the corner, I transformed into someone I barely recognized. Prayer had always been my refuge, but now I prayed for wisdom, for protection, for the courage to uncover whatever truth was worth killing for. "Lord, show me what I need to see," I whispered, standing in our empty kitchen. "Give me the strength to handle whatever I find." My investigation began in the most obvious place, his wallet. For 15 years, I'd done his laundry, organized his dresser, cleaned around his personal belongings without ever thinking to examine them closely. But that morning, while he showered and dressed for work, I memorized every receipt, every business card, every scrap of paper he carried. Most were ordinary: gas stations, restaurants, the dry cleaner where he took his suits. But tucked behind his driver's license was something that made my blood run cold: a receipt from Tiffany and Company in Baton Rouge, dated 2 weeks ago. $750 for a diamond tennis bracelet. I'd never seen that bracelet. He'd never given me anything from Tiffany, never spent that kind of money on jewelry for me in all our years together. My hands trembled as I photographed the receipt with our Polaroid camera, then carefully replaced it exactly where I'd found it. That afternoon, while the children did homework and I prepared dinner, I called information for Baton Rouge. "I need an address for Veronica Dunn," I told the operator, using a name I'd found scribbled on the back of a gas receipt. My heart hammered as I wrote down the address: 1247 Riverside Drive, apartment 3B. Veronica. Even her name sounded beautiful, exotic compared to my plain Jacqueline. Who was this woman? What did she mean to my husband? And why was her address hidden among his business papers? The next day, I did something I'd never done in 15 years of marriage. I lied to my husband about where I was going. Shopping with the church ladies, I told him, kissing his cheek as he left for work. Instead, I drove the 45 minutes to Baton Rouge, my grandmother's words echoing in my head: "A woman needs her own way of surviving." Riverside Drive was everything our neighborhood wasn't. Modern apartment complexes with manicured lawns and swimming pools, the kind of place young professionals lived when they wanted luxury without responsibility. I parked across from building 1247 and waited, praying I wouldn't see what I suspected I would. But there it was, clear as daylight. Terrence's sedan pulling into the parking lot at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, when he should have been at his important client meeting. My heart shattered into 1,000 pieces as I watched him climb those stairs to apartment 3B, using a key he pulled from his pocket like he belonged there. An hour later, the door opened again, and she appeared. Veronica was everything I wasn't: young, maybe 25, with honey-colored skin and curves that filled out her red dress like poetry. She was beautiful in a way that made me understand why a man might risk everything. But what cut deepest was how comfortable they looked together, how his hand rested on her waist like it had every right to be there. That night, I sat at my sewing machine with shaking hands, trying to process what I'd witnessed. The woman who'd trusted blindly for 15 years was gone, replaced by someone harder, someone determined to uncover every lie my marriage had been built on. I started keeping a notebook hidden in my sewing basket, documenting every suspicious phone call, every unexplained expense, every time his story didn't add up. The financial inconsistencies became impossible to ignore once I started looking. Expensive dinners on nights he claimed to be working late. Hotel charges during his business trips, that were twice what any bank conference would cost. Credit card statements I'd never seen, hidden in his locked desk drawer along with bank records that showed transfers I couldn't explain. My faith, once unshakable, began to crack under the weight of deception. How could the man who led our family in prayer every Sunday be living such a lie? How could someone who taught our children about honesty be planning something so sinister that my life was in danger? But with each discovery, I grew stronger, more determined. The truth was worth killing for, but it was also worth living for. 3 weeks into my secret investigation, I made a decision that would change everything. I had to know more about Veronica, about what kind of woman could steal a husband and father from his family. So I returned to Riverside Drive, not to spy this time, but to learn the truth that was apparently worth my life. I waited in the apartment complex's laundry room, praying for an opportunity. God answered in the form of a woman about my age, struggling with an overflowing basket of clothes and a crying toddler. Without thinking, I rushed to help her. And that's how I met Sheila Washington, Veronica's upstairs neighbor and, as I would soon discover, my unlikely salvation. "Honey, you look like you've seen a ghost," Sheila said after we'd gotten her laundry sorted and her baby calmed down. Something in my face must have given away my desperation, because she invited me for coffee in her apartment overlooking the parking lot. "I think my husband is having an affair," I confessed, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "With the woman in 3B. Sheila's expression shifted from sympathy to something darker. "Veronica Dunn? Girl, sit down. You need to hear this." What Sheila told me over the next 2 hours destroyed any remaining illusions about my marriage. Veronica had been bragging to anyone who'd listen about her sugar daddy, a married bank executive who was planning to leave his boring wife and take her away from Louisiana forever. But it wasn't just about love or lust. It was about money. Lots of money. She's been showing off jewelry, designer clothes, talking about moving to Florida with enough cash to buy a house on the beach, Sheila explained, her voice heavy with disgust. Said her man had it all figured out, some scheme with his business partner to set them up for life. Business partner. The words hit me like ice water. Patrick Mackenzie, Terrence's closest friend, his college roommate, and coincidentally, the bank's head of security. The same Patrick whose handwriting I'd seen on restaurant receipts mixed in with Terrence's papers. The same Patrick who'd written that chilling note about killing me if I discovered the truth. "Sheila, I need to ask you something," I said, my voice barely steady. "Has Veronica mentioned anything about someone named Patrick?" Her face went pale. "Patrick's the one who's been warning her to be careful. Said if the wife ever found out about their plan, she'd have to be eliminated." The word hung in the air between us like a death sentence. Eliminated. Not divorced, not abandoned, eliminated. My hands started shaking so violently, I had to set down my coffee cup. "What plan?" I whispered. "What exactly are they planning?" Sheila leaned forward, lowering her voice even though we were alone. "From what Veronica's told me, your husband and this Patrick have been moving money out of the bank for months. Small amounts at first, but getting bigger. They're planning to disappear with close to $500,000, maybe more." $500,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. That wasn't affair money or midlife crisis money. That was life-changing theft, federal crime money. The kind of money that would destroy not just our family, but every family whose accounts had been raided to fund my husband's escape plan. "They're leaving next month," Sheila continued. "Veronica's already given notice at her job. Your husband told her they'd stage some kind of accident or break-in at your house, make it look like you were killed during a robbery. That way, he gets the life insurance money too, and no one questions his grief or his need to start fresh somewhere else." The room started spinning. 15 years of marriage, 2 beautiful children, a life I'd built with love and faith. All of it was just an inconvenience to be eliminated so Terrence could run away with his mistress and stolen money. I thought about Michael and Teresa, sleeping peacefully in their beds while their father planned to make them orphans. The betrayal was so complete, so monstrous, that I couldn't process it all at once. "Are you going to be okay?" Sheila asked, reaching across to squeeze my hand. "Do you have somewhere safe to go?" That's when the full weight of my situation crashed down on me. I couldn't go to the police, who would believe that respected bank employee Terrence Williams was an embezzler and would-be murderer. I couldn't confront him directly. That would only accelerate their timeline. I couldn't even tell anyone in our community, because Patrick Mackenzie had connections everywhere in our small town. I was completely alone, facing men who'd already decided my life was expendable. I don't know, I admitted, tears finally spilling down my cheeks. I honestly don't know what to do. For the first time in my life, prayer felt impossible. How could I ask God to help me when the man I trusted to lead our family in faith was planning my murder? How could I believe in divine protection when evil had been sitting at my breakfast table for months, kissing my cheek and planning my death? But Sheila wasn't finished. Honey, I've been watching this whole situation unfold, and it's been eating at me. What they're planning, it's not just wrong, it's evil. And I think maybe God put us together today for a reason. She was right. In my darkest moment, when everything I'd believed about love, faith, and family lay in ruins around me, I'd been given an ally. Someone who knew the truth, someone who was willing to help me fight back. The scared, trusting woman who'd made breakfast that morning was gone forever. In her place stood someone harder, someone desperate enough to do whatever it took to protect her children and expose the truth. But first, I had to survive long enough to see justice done. That evening in Sheila's apartment marked the beginning of my transformation from victim to survivor. As we sat planning my escape from a marriage that had become a death trap, I discovered that Sheila had her own reasons for wanting to see justice done. Veronica's been bragging about more than just jewelry and beach houses, Sheila confessed, refilling our coffee cups. She's been telling everyone how stupid his wife is, how easy it'll be to get rid of some church mouse who never questions anything. The way she talks about you, it makes me sick. Sheila's own story unfolded as we talked through the night. She'd escaped an abusive marriage 3 years earlier, rebuilt her life from nothing while raising her toddler son alone. Seeing another woman being set up for destruction triggered something fierce in her, a determination to prevent what she'd barely survived herself. "We're going to stop them," she declared, her voice steady with conviction. "But first, we need to get you and your children somewhere safe." Over the next 2 weeks, we crafted a plan that would have made my grandmother proud. While maintaining my perfect housewife routine during the day, I spent my evenings secretly preparing for independence. The coffee can of sewing money I'd hidden behind my winter coats became the foundation of my escape fund, but it wasn't nearly enough. That's when Sheila suggested something that felt both terrifying and liberating. "You've been sewing for church ladies for pocket change. Why not start charging what your work is actually worth?" My grandmother's Singer sewing machine became my lifeline. I started taking on more complex projects, wedding dresses, business suits, formal gowns for special occasions. Word spread through our community about the beautiful clothes coming out of the Williams house, and soon I had more work than I could handle. "Mrs. Williams, this dress is prettier than anything in the department stores," Mrs. Ruth Johnson told me, admiring the emerald green church dress I'd created for her. "You should open your own shop." The idea seemed impossible at first. How could a housewife with no business experience compete with established boutiques? But as my client list grew and my confidence built, the dream started feeling achievable. Sheila and I began meeting regularly, planning what we'd call J&S Designs, a boutique that would cater to professional women who wanted quality clothing at reasonable prices. Meanwhile, I continued documenting Terrence's crimes. Every suspicious transaction, every unexplained absence, every piece of evidence that proved his guilt went into a detailed file I kept hidden in my sewing basket. Sheila helped me photograph bank statements and receipts, building an ironclad case against both Terrence and Patrick. The breakthrough came when Sheila overheard Veronica on the phone, confirming their departure date, April 30th, 1995. Just 3 weeks away. We knew we had to act before then, but we also knew we needed help from someone with real authority. That's when I remembered Detective Sarah Morrison from our church congregation. She joined Mount Olive 6 months earlier, and something about her quiet strength reminded me of my grandmother. Taking the biggest risk of my life, I approached her after Sunday service. "Detective Morrison, I need to speak with you privately," I said, my heart hammering. "It's about my husband and bank embezzlement." Her expression sharpened immediately. "Mrs. Williams, are you in immediate danger?" "Very much so," I admitted. 3 days later, federal agents arrested both Terrence and Patrick as they attempted to transfer the final payment to an offshore account. The investigation revealed they'd stolen over $600,000 from client accounts, using Patrick's security access to cover their tracks and Terrence's position to authorize the transfers. The arrest happened at our house, with neighbors watching from their porches as federal agents led my husband away in handcuffs. Michael and Teresa stood frozen in our doorway, unable to comprehend how their respected father had become a criminal. "Mama, what's happening?" Teresa whispered, clutching my skirt as reporters gathered outside our gate. "Your father made some very bad choices," I told both children, holding them close. "But we're going to be okay. I promise we're going to be okay." The trial lasted 6 months. Terrence received 8 years in federal prison for embezzlement and conspiracy. Patrick got 10 years for his role as the mastermind. Veronica, who'd received expensive gifts but wasn't directly involved in the theft, faced no charges but lost her job and had to move back with her parents in shame. Our church community rallied around us in ways that restored my faith in humanity. Pastor Johnson organized meals for our family, the Women's Auxiliary helped with childcare while I worked, and several church members became my first major clients for JNS Designs. "Sister Jacqueline, you've shown us all what real strength looks like," Pastor Johnson said during one of his sermons. "When the storms came, you didn't break. You bent, and then you built something beautiful." Michael threw himself into his studies, earning straight A's as if academic success could somehow erase his father's crimes. Teresa found solace in helping me with sewing projects, her small fingers learning to thread needles and measure fabric, while we talked through her confusion and anger. The hardest part wasn't the financial struggle or the community gossip. It was helping my children understand that their father's choices didn't define them. We attended family counseling at the church, learned new ways to communicate, and slowly began building a life based on truth instead of lies. By Christmas of 1995, JNS Designs had its own small storefront on Main Street. Sheila and I worked side by side, creating beautiful clothes for women who understood the value of independence and self-reliance. We'd survived the storm. Now it was time to thrive. 5 years after Terrence's arrest, JNS Designs had become more than just a boutique. It was a cornerstone of our community and a symbol of what women could accomplish when they refused to be broken by betrayal. Our little storefront on Main Street had expanded into the adjacent building, with separate sections for business attire, church wear, and special occasion dresses. What started as survival had blossomed into something I'd never imagined possible, a thriving business that employed 6 women and served clients from 3 different parishes. "Mrs. Williams, you've created something magical here," said Dr. Patricia Hayes, the first Black female physician in our town, as she tried on a burgundy power suit I designed specifically for her court testimony as an expert witness. "These clothes make me feel like I can conquer the world." That's exactly what I'd hoped for. Sheila and I had built JNS Designs around the idea that professional Black women deserved clothing that honored both their achievements and their heritage. Our suits were tailored to fit real women's bodies. Our church dresses celebrated elegance without sacrificing comfort, and our evening wear made every client feel like royalty. The church fashion shows became legendary events in our community. Twice a year, Mount Olive's Fellowship Hall would transform into a runway where local women modeled our latest creations. These weren't just fashion shows, they were celebrations of resilience, showcasing teachers, nurses, business owners, and community leaders wearing clothes that told stories of strength and success. Sister Jacqueline has shown us that our trials can become our triumphs, Pastor Johnson announced during one show, watching Mrs. Ruby strut down the makeshift runway in an emerald silk dress that made her look 20 years younger. When the world tried to break her, she built something beautiful. My children had grown into remarkable young people during these years of rebuilding. Michael, now 19, had earned a full scholarship to Louisiana Tech for mechanical engineering. His father's betrayal had motivated him to become someone who built things up instead of tearing them down. He spent his summers working construction, his hands learning to create structures that would last, his mind focused on a future where his integrity would never be questioned. "Mama, I'm going to design bridges that connect communities," he told me the night before leaving for college. "Daddy tried to burn bridges, but I want to build them." Teresa, at 16, had inherited my love for fashion but added her own artistic vision. She sketched designs constantly, her drawings showing sophisticated understanding of fabric, color, and form that amazed our clients. Several of her creations had already been featured in our fashion shows, earning praise from women who couldn't believe such talent existed in someone so young. "I want to study fashion design in New York," she announced one evening while helping me finish a wedding dress. "But I also want to come back here and expand what we've built. Maybe we could have J&S designs in multiple cities." Her dreams were bigger than mine had ever been, and that filled me with pride beyond measure. Then, in early 2003, everything shifted again. Terrence was granted early release for good behavior, having served 6.5 years of his 8-year sentence. The news hit our family like an unexpected storm, bringing back memories and emotions we'd worked hard to process. He appeared at our door on a Tuesday morning, looking older and smaller than I remembered. Prison had changed him. The arrogant bank executive was gone, replaced by someone who seemed genuinely broken by what he'd done to our family. "Jacqueline, I know I have no right to ask anything of you," he said, standing on the porch where he'd once kissed me goodbye before his secret trips to Baton Rouge. "But I need you to know how sorry I am. Not just for the money, not just for the affair, but for for what I was willing to do to you." The children watched from the doorway as their father attempted to apologize for trying to arrange their mother's murder. Michael's jaw was set in stone, while Teresa hid behind her brother, still afraid of the man who'd shattered their sense of safety. "I spent 6 years in prison thinking about what I threw away," Terrence continued, tears streaming down his face. "The woman who loved me unconditionally, the children who looked up to me, the life we could have built together. I know I can't undo any of it, but I want to try to make things right." My faith had been tested in ways that nearly broke it, but it had also been strengthened by years of seeing God's provision through our struggles. Christianity taught forgiveness, but it also taught wisdom. I could forgive Terrence for what he'd done, but I could never again trust him with our lives or our future. "I forgive you," I told him quietly, the words feeling both heavy and liberating. "But forgiveness doesn't mean we go back to how things were. You made choices that can't be undone." We established careful boundaries. Terrence could have supervised visits with the children if they chose to see him. He could attend their graduations and important events, but as a guest, not as the head of our family. He found work at a small accounting firm and rented a modest apartment across town, slowly trying to rebuild some kind of relationship with Michael and Teresa. The community watched our family navigate this new reality with grace and wisdom. J&S Designs continued growing, earning recognition from fashion magazines and attracting clients from as far away as New Orleans. We opened a second location, hired more seamstresses, and began offering fashion design workshops for young women in our community. By 2005, I'd been featured in Black Enterprise magazine as a successful entrepreneur, speaking at business conferences about turning adversity into opportunity. The scared housewife who'd found that threatening note was gone completely, replaced by a woman who knew her worth and refused to settle for less than she deserved. But my heart remained carefully guarded, focused on my children, my business, and my faith. I'd learned to be complete on my own terms. By 2012, my life had settled into a rhythm I'd never expected, but had grown to love deeply. Michael was 31, a successful civil engineer in Houston with a beautiful wife named Denise and twin daughters who called me Grandmama Jackie. Teresa had earned her fashion design degree from Parsons in New York and returned home to expand J&S Designs into a regional brand with locations in Baton Rouge, New Orleans, and Jackson, Mississippi. I was 59 years old, a successful businesswoman who'd built something meaningful from the ashes of betrayal. My days were full, designing new collections, mentoring young entrepreneurs, spending weekends with my granddaughters. I thought I was complete, That romantic love was a chapter I'd closed forever. Then Marquis Washington walked into JNS Designs on a humid Thursday afternoon in June. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, his voice carrying the confident warmth of a man comfortable in his own skin. "I'm looking for something special for my sister's 50th birthday." The lady at the jewelry store said this was the place for elegant dresses. I looked up from the alterations I was working on to find myself face to face with one of the most distinguished men I'd ever seen. Tall and broad-shouldered, with silver threading through his dark hair and eyes that held both strength and kindness. He wore his navy suit like it was tailored specifically for him, and when he smiled, something in my chest fluttered that I'd thought was dead forever. "We certainly are," I managed, setting down my needle and standing to greet him properly. "I'm Jacqueline Williams, owner of JNS Designs. Tell me about your sister." What followed was an hour-long conversation that felt like 5 minutes. Marquis described his sister Dr. Angela Washington, a prominent pediatrician who deserved something as special as she was. But as we discussed fabric choices and design options, I found myself learning about him, a recently retired oil and gas executive who'd spent 30 years building his company before selling it to focus on philanthropy and family. "You're very passionate about your work," he observed, watching me sketch potential designs for his sister's dress. "It shows in everything here. This place is soul." "Thank you," I said, surprised by how much his praise meant to me. JNS Designs represents more than just clothing. It's about helping women feel their own strength. Something in his expression shifted, became more attentive. "Sounds like there's a story behind that philosophy." There was indeed a story, but it wasn't one I shared with customers. Yet something about Marquis made me want to tell him everything about the betrayal, the near-murder plot, the long journey from victim to victor. Instead, I simply said, "Sometimes life teaches us what we're really made of." He nodded with understanding that seemed deeper than casual sympathy. Life has a way of showing us our true strength, doesn't it? When Angela's dress was ready 2 weeks later, Marquis insisted on bringing her to try it on personally. Watching his sister's face light up as she saw herself in the mirror, seeing how genuinely he celebrated her joy, told me everything I needed to know about his character. "Jacqueline, this dress is perfect," Angela gushed, spinning in front of the three-way mirror. "I feel like royalty." "You look like royalty," Marquis said, but his eyes were on me when he spoke. "Thank you for creating something so beautiful for my sister." After Angela left with her new dress, Marquis lingered in the shop, examining our displays with genuine interest. "Would you have dinner with me?" he asked finally, the question simple but weighted with hope. "I'd love to hear more about how you build all this." My first instinct was to decline politely. I'd perfected the art of gracious refusal over the years, deflecting the occasional advances from men who saw a successful single woman as an interesting challenge. But something about Marquis felt different, patient, respectful, genuinely interested in who I was rather than what I represented. "I'd like that," I heard myself saying. "But I should mention that I have 2 grown children, 4 granddaughters, and a very full life. I'm not looking for someone to complete me." His smile was warm and understanding. "Good thing I'm not looking for someone incomplete. I'm looking for someone who's built something beautiful with her life and might enjoy sharing some of it with someone who appreciates what she's accomplished." Our first dinner stretched into 3 hours at a quiet restaurant where Marquis listened with genuine fascination as I shared the story of JS Design's growth. He told me about his own journey, building his company from nothing, losing his first wife to cancer 10 years earlier, learning to find purpose in giving back to his community. "I've been alone for a decade," he admitted over dessert. "Not because I haven't had opportunities, but because I was waiting for someone who understood that love at our age isn't about rescuing each other. It's about choosing to build something together while remaining whole individuals." The courtship that followed was unlike anything I'd experienced in my youth. Marquis pursued me with the patience and wisdom of a man who understood that trust, once broken, required careful rebuilding. He attended our church fashion shows, brought thoughtful gifts for my granddaughters, and spent time getting to know Michael and Teresa without trying to replace their father. "Mama, he makes you laugh," Teresa observed one Sunday after Marquis had joined us for dinner. "I haven't seen you laugh like that in years." She was right. Marquis brought lightness back into my life, without diminishing the strength I'd built through struggle. He celebrated my independence rather than trying to control it, supported my business dreams rather than competing with them. When he proposed 2 years later, it was in the original JNS Designs location where we'd first met, surrounded by dresses that represented my journey from broken housewife to successful entrepreneur. "Jacqueline, you've already proven you can build something beautiful from nothing," he said, kneeling among the fabric and dreams I'd turned into reality. "Would you build a new chapter with me?" Here I am today, 62 years old, and sitting in the sunroom of the home Marquis and I built together, watching our youngest granddaughter Emma play dress up in one of the vintage pieces from JNS Design's first collection. It's been nearly 30 years since I found that chilling note in Terrence's Bible, and sometimes I can barely recognize the terrified woman I used to be. JNS Designs now operates in 8 cities across the South, with Teresa as creative director and a team of talented designers who understand that clothing should celebrate a woman's strength, not hide it. We've dressed governors' wives, successful entrepreneurs, and thousands of everyday women who deserve to feel magnificent. Last month, we launched an online platform that ships our designs nationwide, and I still get emotional reading customer reviews from women who say our clothes help them feel confident during job interviews, court cases, or simply walking into a room where they belonged. "Grandmama Jackie, look how pretty I am." Emma twirls in a child-sized version of the emerald dress I designed for Dr. Patricia Hayes 20 years ago. At 4 years old, she already has opinions about colors and fabrics that make me think the next generation of JNS Designs is in very capable hands. Michael visits every month from Houston, bringing his wife Denise and their twin daughters Sarah and Grace. He's become one of the most respected engineers in Texas, designing infrastructure that connects communities just like he promised all those years ago. Watching him teach his daughters about building blocks and structural integrity, I see how he's created the stability he never had as a child. Even Terrence has found his place in this complicated family tapestry we've woven over the decades. He's 68 now, grayer and quieter, working part-time at a small accounting firm and living modestly in his apartment across town. Every Christmas and birthday, every graduation and important milestone, he asks permission to attend and accepts whatever level of interaction the children allow. "Thank you for letting me be here," he tells me quietly at each gathering, the same words he's spoken for 15 years. We maintain a civil relationship built on clear boundaries and mutual respect for the grandchildren who love us both. He knows his role now, not as my husband or the head of our family, but as a grandfather who's grateful for whatever connection he's allowed to have. The healing didn't happen overnight. It took years of family counseling, honest conversations, and learning to separate forgiveness from trust. I forgave Terrence because my faith demanded it, but I never forgot the lessons his betrayal taught me about protecting myself and my children. That distinction between forgiveness and wisdom has served me well in business and in life. "You know what I admire most about you?" Marquis said just this morning, bringing me coffee in my favorite cup while I worked on designs for our fall collection. "You turned your worst betrayal into your greatest strength. You didn't just survive, you created something that helps other women survive and thrive." That's the message I want to leave with anyone who's listening to my story. When I found that note threatening my life, I had a choice. I could have confronted Terrence immediately and possibly become another tragic statistic. I could have run away and spent the rest of my life looking over my shoulder. Instead, I chose to be strategic, to gather allies, to build evidence, and to protect my children while seeking justice. The woman who made breakfast for a husband planning her murder learned to trust her instincts, value her worth, and never again accept less than she deserved. The scared housewife who found a threatening note became an entrepreneur who employs dozens of people and inspires hundreds more. Faith played a crucial role in my transformation, but not in the way I expected. I stopped praying for God to fix my circumstances and started praying for wisdom to navigate them myself. I learned that sometimes divine intervention looks like an unexpected ally like Sheila, sometimes like the courage to investigate what you fear to discover, and sometimes like the strength to rebuild your life from scratch. Love found me again when I wasn't looking for it, in the form of a man who understood that true partnership means celebrating each other's completeness rather than trying to fill each other's gaps. Marquis and I have built something beautiful together, not because either of us was broken and needed fixing, but because we both brought whole, healed hearts to our relationship. To anyone watching this who feels trapped in betrayal, who's discovered that their life is built on lies, who's facing threats from people they trusted, you are stronger than you know. Start documenting everything, find your allies, trust your instincts, and remember that survival is just the first step. What you build afterward can be more beautiful than anything you lost. God's plan for your life is bigger than other people's plans against you. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the catalyst for the best thing you create. My husband's betrayal led to JNS Designs, which has touched thousands of lives. His attempt to destroy me became the foundation for a legacy that will outlive us all. If you're in a place of betrayal right now, hold on. Document everything, find your people, and remember that this chapter of your story doesn't have to be the ending. Sometimes the most beautiful chapters are the ones you write after everything falls apart. Second chances are real. New love is possible. Justice exists. And you are worth fighting for. Did you like my story? And what city are you listening from? Tell me what you were doing as you listened to my story. If it touched you, or if it taught you something, then please share it with others who might need to hear it. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. By the way, don't forget to subscribe. It encourages me to keep bringing more stories like this. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.